What if the FIA's most confidential document revealed that Hamilton was penalized for something the FIA itself admitted it could not prevent? What seemed like a simple sanction in the race has become one of the biggest regulatory controversies in recent years. Ferrari is furious, Hamilton feels betrayed, and the FIA in the center of the storm. Subscribe to continue uploading more of this type of content now if we continue. The Mexican Grand Prix. The content at first seemed like standard procedure. The FIA sanctioned Lewis Hamilton, then a Ferrari driver, with a 10-second penalty for having left the track at turn 4 and supposedly obtaining a lasting advantage over the Red Bull of Max Verstappen. What no one anticipated is that this document contained a direct and obvious contradiction in its own foundations. The stewards explained that Hamilton could not follow the correct route of the circuit due to excessive speed that led him to lock his brakes, go off the track, and cross the grass before rejoining the track. But what was truly revealing was the exact phrase in the minutes. The driver was unable to follow the route prescribed by the race director. Therefore, a violation of the race director's notes is not considered to have occurred. In regulatory language, that line is almost an absolution. It means that for the stewards themselves, Hamilton did not intentionally violate protocol. This was a piloting error caused by extreme conditions, not malice or a deliberate search for advantage. And yet, just a few paragraphs later, the same document imposes a 10-second penalty for leaving the track and obtaining a lasting advantage without returning the position. This is where the case becomes an earthquake. This decision directly contradicts the logic previously stated in the same document. The FIA recognized that Hamilton did not have control of his car and immediately punished him as if he had. This inconsistency, one of the most serious recorded in recent times, immediately undermined the credibility of the process and caused chain reactions. Ferrari's reaction was not immediate, but when it came, it shook the paddock with the force of a perfectly articulated storm. What for other teams might have been a minor administrative complaint, for the Scuderia was a direct attack on its competitive legitimacy. In the days following the leak of Document 36, Maranello's initial silence transformed into an unprecedented public offensive led by Fred Vasseur, the team's director, who did not mince his words in describing the handling of the incident as clumsy, arbitrary, and dangerously inconsistent. Vasseur didn't just criticize the decision. He went further. He broke it down piece by piece in interviews, press conferences, and appearances in Italian and French media. In each intervention, he highlighted the most fundamental contradiction of the document. It is recognized that Hamilton could not control his car, and yet he is penalized as if he had made a conscious decision. According to the Frenchman, this twisted logic is unsustainable not only from a sporting point of view, but also from a legal point of view. In his words, if that type of reasoning is accepted, then any incident can be reinterpreted at the whim of the commissioner on duty. It is the end of any established rule. But what completely set Ferrari off was not just the textual contradiction, but the tangible impact this penalty had on Hamilton's career and, by extension, the championship. The British driver was in a position to secure at least 4th place and possibly the first podium with the red team in his debut season. Instead, the 10-second penalty pushed him out of contention, forcing him to serve the penalty during his first pit stop, rejoining in 14th position and ultimately finishing 8th. What Ferrari considered a minor infraction became a sporting ruling. Vasseur was clear. With 5 seconds, we would have finished 4th. With 10 seconds, we lost all possibility. And behind that statement were precise calculations, internal simulations, and real-time analysis. The team knew exactly how many points it had left on the table for a penalty that, in its opinion, shouldn't have even existed. And those points were vital. In a season as tight as 2025, where the margin between McLaren, Red Bull, Ferrari, and Mercedes is minimal, every point counts not only for the Constructors' Championship, but for future negotiations, sponsorship renewals, and institutional prestige. The frustration was also fueled by a second battlefront, the behavior of the stewards in similar situations within the same race. Vasseur mentioned it explicitly when pointing out that Max Verstappen cut chicanes in turns 1 and 3 without receiving any type of penalty. From Ferrari's point of view, the difference in criteria was so flagrant that it could not be explained by technical interpretation, but by an unequal application of the rules. The word that was repeated most in the halls of Maranello was double standards. And in a sport where regulatory precision should be absolute, that is a very serious accusation. But the offensive was not limited to statements. According to sources close to the team, Ferrari requested a formal hearing with the FIA to demand explanations. The objective was not to reverse the penalty, something virtually impossible once applied, but to set a precedent. Vasseur and his team wanted to force the FIA to respond publicly for the Document 36 contradiction and to review the procedures that allow such an incoherent resolution to reach official publication. In legal terms, this could open the door to new clauses in the sport's regulations that require greater internal coherence in the sanctioning documents. In addition, Ferrari found echo in other teams. Although none expressed it openly, several team leaders privately expressed concern about the lack of transparency and consistency in the application of sanctions. In the ultra-competitive world of Formula One, alliances tend to be fragile and circumstantial, but when a team as emblematic as Ferrari points out a structural fissure in the arbitration system, others listen carefully. What was at stake was no longer just a result, but the very integrity of the championship. And in this context, the figure of Hamilton became the symbol of a broader injustice. It was not simply the punishment of a pilot, but the public exposure of how erroneous decisions, amplified by unauthorized leaks, can unleash an institutional war. Ferrari knew it, and that's why he decided not to remain silent. Because beyond the lost points or the ruined podium, there was the need to defend the most basic principle of sport, that justice must be applied equally to all. Always. Regardless of the color of the car, the name of the driver, or the location on the track where the incident occurred. Speaking immediately after the race, Hamilton was blunt. "I feel very disappointed by the governing body. It's double standards, as you can see, and it is what it is." There were no detours. There were no euphemisms. It was a full-fledged accusation against the body that defines and applies the rules of Formula One. What could previously be interpreted as professional diplomacy, this time became a public complaint. He was not a driver frustrated by a bad result. He was a historical figure in motorsport pointing out an institutional crack. The penalty was the spark, but the fire burning in his words came from something deeper. From an accumulation of years in which, at different stages of his career, he has felt questioned for non-sporting reasons. Of a sense, perhaps silent but persistent, that his place in Formula One history has always been scrutinized more harshly than that of his contemporaries. And now, in his first season with Ferrari, a project that he had built with enthusiasm, as a kind of new beginning, he found himself once again at the center of a controversy that he had not caused. From the moment the document was made public, the Formula One community stopped seeing the FIA as an infallible referee. It was revealed that even within the body of commissioners themselves there may be contradictions that escape logic and that are printed in official minutes without the slightest self-criticism. This erosion of credibility is, in many ways, more damaging than any on-track driving error. Because if the application of the regulation can be arbitrary, if a sanction can be imposed even when the document itself admits that there was no intention or control, then there are no longer guarantees for anyone. And it is in this context where the consequences begin to multiply silently, but lethally. First of all, a new battlefront opens between the teams and the FIA. The relationship between both parties has always been tense, but this time the breaking point is more structural than technical. Ferrari has already requested formal explanations. Other teams, although more discreet, have also begun to demand greater transparency in sanctioning processes. There are fears that the 2025 season could be marred by similar decisions, and that threatens to turn every on-track incident into a political bombshell. Secondly, Formula One's international image has taken a significant hit. Media from around the world have not been slow to amplify the conflict. Headlines in the British, Italian, and German press have used words such as scandal, double standard, and institutional crisis to describe what happened in Mexico. This directly affects the commercial value of the championship. Sponsors who invest millions of euros hoping to be associated with a serious and professional product are beginning to question whether they are linking themselves to a sport that respects its own rules or that interprets them according to convenience. But there is more. The scandal has triggered a domino effect within the paddock. Engineers, former commissioners, and retired pilots have begun to speak. In recent interviews, figures with decades of experience have confessed that these types of contradictions are not as uncommon as is believed. They have simply never come to light so clearly. The leak of Document 36, then, is not just an anomaly. It is documentary evidence that the system has cracks, and that those cracks may have altered key results in the past without anyone knowing. The 2025 Mexican Grand Prix will go down in history not only for what happened on the track, but for what was revealed off it. The leak of document 36 was not a simple administrative error, nor an anecdotal episode within the calendar. It was, in many ways, a breach of trust that you think the FIA should issue a public rectification on the penalty imposed on Hamilton? Do you consider that this situation marks a before and after in a way in which sanctions should be managed in F1? Or do you think that, despite the contradiction, the penalty was fair given the final result on the track? Subscribe to continue uploading more of that content. Now you really think about all this.